Hello and welcome to Money Talk with me, Russell Quirk. This week we're talking about the spring budget as Jeremy Hunt brings us the government's tax and spending plans in his first ever budget as Chancellor. And things look rather different from his so-called autumn statement in November last year when he was forced to steady the ship after Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's disastrous mini-budget.
No wonder he looks a little nervous. Barely 48 hours in the job, Jeremy Hunt is trying to restore confidence while junking most of the government's economic policy.
And from keeping a little more in your pocket when filling up your car to boosting your pension, here are the winners and the losers of today's budget. Firstly, fuel duty. Well, let's start with the hits, and that freeze to fuel duty, the 13th year in a row that this has been done. And the Chancellor will also be keeping the 5p cut that was introduced last year. Now, that will come as a relief that the government hasn't caved into pressure from environmentalists to raise this, but in a cost of living crisis, is this enough? I'd actually like to see him go further, frankly. The fact that we have VAT on top of tax, so 58p fuel duty, albeit reduced now down to around 53p, but with VAT on top, kind of doesn't make any sense to me. And actually, although I know that we have the spectre of inflation to contend with, although most economists say that perhaps that has already peaked, the fact that if we were to take that slab off of the cost of fuel, that of course would filter through to the entire economy because of course food, clothing, consumer goods and so on all have to get into the shops somehow. So I think as ever the Chancellor really has missed a trick in terms of helping to solve this cost of living crisis that of course we're all suffering from. So secondly, pensions. Is it good news for those of us with a pension? Well, the lifetime allowance for tax-free savings will be raised. The current maximum for pension savings is £1.07 million. It's thought that the move could benefit 2 million Brits and help them avoid paying up to £180,000 in tax on their pension pots. Now, look, this is a good thing, and it's not often that I compliment this government, but in a quest to try and get older people back to work, those that perhaps decided after the pandemic and having been furloughed for a period of time that they didn't really want to or need to work, this is an encouragement for older people to continue working, to put more money into their pension pots on a tax-free basis, so as to fill that gap right now between the million vacancies or so that there are and a very, very low indeed unemployment rate. So I think this is very, very good news. The question is, of course, would it make any difference, and will people in their 50s and 60s actually respond? Let's just see. So next on the list, energy bills. Whilst there are signs that Britain's energy crisis is easing, families are still feeling the pinch, and so a freeze to the energy price guarantee will come as welcome news. From April, average household energy bills will stay capped at £2,500, avoiding the rumoured rise to £3,000. And extra costs for customers on prepayment meters have been scrapped, meaning that we should see an end to shocking scenes that were uncovered by the Times, with companies forcing the most vulnerable into paying a prepayment premium. So this, of course, is very, very good news for those that genuinely can't pay their energy bills and don't want bailiffs and the power companies breaking into their homes and installing meters against their will. However, what I would say is, of course, this is not therefore then a green light for those that don't want to pay their bills not to do so. The other thing to consider, of course, though, is that with wholesale gas prices having reduced considerably since the summer, certainly off their peak quite considerably, this whole problem, this whole issue that is well documented around people not being able to afford to heat their homes is frankly a temporary one. And I think we need to kind of get over ourselves a little bit on the basis that this is not permanent. This is something that is going to subside in due time. And finally in our list, stamp duty, one of my favourite subjects. Where is another cut to stamp duty? Cuts announced in last year's mini-budget were one of Kwasi Kwarteng's little victories and could save buyers over £6,000.
In the current system, there is no stamp duty to pay on the first £125,000 of a property's value. We are doubling that to £250,000.
But Jeremy Hunt said in his autumn statement these would only last until 2025 and didn't address it again this time around. And I think that's a real shame. The fact that stamp duty now nets something like £9 billion to the Exchequer and actually is arguably a tax on the southeast on the basis that, of course, it penalises people that are having to buy, because of where they live and where they work, more expensive homes. After all, stamp duty was first introduced back in about the 15th or 16th century, I believe, as a tax to fund a war on France. Now, I know we're not getting on with France particularly well, notwithstanding the fact we're about to send them another £500 million to try and stop Channel migrants. However, I don't think we're actually at risk of going to war with them. So perhaps it's about time that we stopped with this stamp duty and actually found a different way of raising a bit of money for the Exchequer, but without actually penalising would-be buyers of UK property. And now to our Basket League. Well, with the cost of living clearly at the front of our minds, let's take a look at the Basket League, our analysis of the cost of essentials at each of the major supermarkets, so you know where to spend your money. And we're seeing some big changes at the top end of our table. M&S clearly watched last week's show because this week their chicken is back in line with the other supermarkets. Well, hey, that means the most expensive in our Basket League is Asda at £21.99. Just below them is Tesco at £20.14, and M&S takes up third place at just below 20 quid. Sainsbury's is next at £19.77, and still the cheapest is Aldi at £17.96. And now to our audience questions. Let's see what you have been asking this week. Rob Wallace says, removing VAT from petrol and diesel would be good. Why do we pay two sets of tax for one item? Well, I guess there's an obvious answer to that. It's all about money. It's all about the money that goes into the Exchequer. The fuel duty alone is worth something like £25 billion to the Exchequer. Then, of course, you add on VAT on top of that, and it doesn't take a lot of working out as to why successive chancellors want to maintain that VAT on fuel duty. Interestingly, fuel duty £25 billion. How much is spent on our roads? Only about half of that. Joe Gardner, as our second question, on the pensions allowance rise, how will this affect how long I have to work for? Will I be working into my 70s? Well, actually, no. The Chancellor hasn't announced anything in terms of a change of retirement age. What he has suggested is that you now can put in just under £800,000 into your pension pot that is also now going to be tax-free. So it means you can effectively save more into your pension and do so with a tax allowance. So this is not about you having to work longer. It's basically an incentive that enables you to do so with a tax-free benefit that previously you would not have derided. Liz Crook, the energy price cap has been frozen, but with energy costs on the way down, do you think the cap will go down in the future too? Well, I would hope so. You know, it's been well documented that energy wholesale prices have reduced significantly since they started to go up in the middle of last year. So one would imagine that now, let's hope, consumer prices will follow. And frankly, if they don't, then I think it's a matter for the consumer authorities to make sure that they're looking into why these costs are not being driven down in parallel with wholesale costs. Will the cap reduce? Yes, I would think it probably will. It will have to, because hopefully, fingers crossed, as I say, the cost of consumer energy will now start to fall quite significantly. So that's it for Money Talk this week. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment, and particularly comment and tell me if you agree with me or indeed if you disagree with me. Until next time.